Hello my friends, I'm Operator Starsky and today we'll talk about the most important updates of the week. Failing Russian offensive that continues in the East Ukraine, good Ukrainian drones decimating Russian military, oil and gas industry, Russian invaders populating deserted Ukrainian territories with settlers from Russia, and the closest Russian allies seizing the procurement of the Russian oil. You're watching the Frontline Focus. Let's roll. First of all, let's talk about the most recent updates from Ukrainian front lines, where Putin continues his time-honored tradition of throwing Russians at Ukrainian positions until they disappear. In most cases, of course, the Russians disappear first. Let's start in Kharkiv, where Russian troops tried once again to cosplay as liberators by assaulting Vovchansk because it went so well the first 5 times. No confirmed advances were reported here, of course, but lots of cardio. Always important to keep those tiny legs moving, especially when retreating. Meanwhile, over in Kupiansk, Russians actually managed to crawl a few meters forward, according to different reports. The Russian superpower, after a month of throwing everything it had into a meat grinder, finally managed to capture 2 small Ukrainian villages of Kindrashivka and Kamenka, with a combined population of stunning 352 people before the Russian invasion. That's basically all you needed to know about the offensive power of the terrorist federation in 2025. Then in Liman we had the usual, Russians riding motorcycles into Ukrainian lines, and we all know how it usually ends for the Russian bikers, don't we? OSINT reports no significant Russian gains in this area because of how stupid they are. And I just thought that actually Russians can make a bunch of really cool movies about the war, featuring, for example, the aging Steven Seagal. I wonder if they will portray his character riding a bike or a donkey. Please let me know in the comments. Down in Siversk and Chasiv Yar, Russians continued to bang their heads against Ukrainian defenses. No advances reported here. And finally in Zaporizhia, they poked around near Hulyai-Pole and Novopilya. No progress there either. And you probably want to know why. Well, if you're tired listening to me explaining every time that Russia's armored vehicles are mostly destroyed and therefore almost never used these days to support their infantry, in this case you may probably check, for example, Douglas McGregor, who says that actually Russia didn't even start fighting for real. Who knows, maybe they're waiting until their last tank is destroyed and then they will deploy, for example, their balalaika ensembles. You're laughing, but in fact Steven Seagal wearing Russian kokoshnik and fafudia is a chilling experience. So to summarize, like a drunk guy in a nightclub tries to flirt with everyone at once and fails. That's basically Russia attacking everywhere and succeeding nowhere, because they've lost majority of their offensive potential over the past 3 years. The Russian offensive capacity is declining, the Ukrainian defensive capacity is increasing, and based on these trends you can pretty much predict the result. Last week the good Ukrainian drones apparently decided that it was time to remind Russia that distance is not really a problem anymore. In the Russian city of Ryazan, the good Ukrainian drones hit the local oil refinery, and of course Russian officials said that it was just the debris that happened to fall exactly on their fuel tanks. Next up, Samara Oblast, where the Novokuybishevsk refinery, a really big one, caught fire after a Ukrainian drone strike, and by caught fire I mean the flames were reportedly 180 meters high. Personally, I will add this one to my top rating of the most impressive fireworks in the terror Russian Federation. Then there was Voronezh, where another drone hit the oil depot. We know that several oil tanks got blasted, and Russia, that's been leveling Ukrainian cities for more than 3 years straight, blamed a terrorist attack. Then in Russian Penza things got even more interesting, because Ukraine hit the Elektropribor factory, one of the places making military electronics for the Russian terrorists. The strike resulted in pretty serious fire. Terror Russia claims they intercepted most of the drones, but strangely the factory still burned. Must be a coincidence. In Krasnodarsk, cried the good Ukrainian drones paid a visit to Primorsko-Akhtarsk airfield, one of the airfields that are used to launch the Russian Shahed drones. As a result, there was some damage, a bit of smoke, and maybe we can expect a little less buzzing over Ukraine next week. Now, all this came right after Russia's brutal strike on Kyiv on July 31st. We're talking 300 drones and missiles that resulted in 31 civilians dead and dozens injured. Ukraine, without shouting and without drama, rightfully responded with precision drone strike across multiple Russian regions, taking out fuel infrastructure, military infrastructure, and Russian morale. So while Moscow's still pushing the whole "we've got everything under control" narrative, Ukrainian drones are flying hundreds and thousands of kilometers and punching holes in Russian military and oil industry, making the Russian citizens extremely happy to see their special military operation coming home. While the Russian oil refineries keep burning, the Russian oil exports also face hard times. Between July and early August, India's state-run oil companies quietly stopped buying Russian crude. According to different experts, it was a result of a big warning coming from the White House saying, "Buy Russian oil and you can potentially face up to 500% tariffs on your exports." And India, being a country that actually sells a lot of refined oil to the West, took one look at those numbers and went, you know what, we like discounts, but we like access to Western markets more, obviously because Western countries generate approximately 60% of the global GDP on planet Earth. Now, don't get me wrong, because India's government is still saying all the right things. They say oil is oil and we buy based on economics, not politics, but we all understand the reason, right? Meanwhile, we know that private players like Reliance and Nayara are still buying Russian oil for now, because they're getting nervous, especially with European sanctions tightening on refined products. And of course, there's still China that continues buying Russian oil with a big discount. But frankly speaking, I think that the moment it becomes a liability, they'll drop Russia really fast. Now, my friends, I would like you to take a look at this picture of a family from Tuva, a region in Russia. According to the Telegram channel My Mariupol, they've just been given a new apartment in a Ukrainian city that Russia bombed to ruins, killing tens of thousands of innocent Ukrainian people and forcing the survivors to flee or die under the rubble. Today, Russians are bringing in their own people to live in houses built on top of Ukrainian graves. In the 1940s, after the Soviet Union deported Crimean Tatars from Crimea, they moved in Russians to replace them, trying to erase entire native population, and years later their grandchildren were the ones welcoming Russian soldiers in 2014 and saying that Crimea was always Russian. In 1932-1933, during the Holodomor, Stalin's regime starved millions of Ukrainians to death, and once villages were empty, the Soviets brought in people from Russia to repopulate the land. Ukraine's identity was replaced by design, and again, decades after, they were installing Russian flags on Ukrainian administration, saying that Donbass was always Russian. And today, in 2025, we can see the same genocide against Ukrainians committed in cities like Mariupol. Mariupol was once a Ukrainian city. Now it's a ghost town rebuilt for the Russian propaganda. They show off new buildings, they hang out keys to families from far-off Russian regions like Tuva, and smile for the cameras. And looking at that, you should ask yourself, where are the original families, the ones who lived, worked, raised their kids in these same neighborhoods? And the answer is they're killed, they're buried in mass graves, or scattered around the world as refugees. The Russian war of aggression is a calculated demographic takeover. Fact is, by invading Ukraine, Russia is literally trying to rewrite who really belongs here. Please make sure to show this photo to those who still think that Russia attacked Ukraine because of NATO expansion or American biolabs. Also, don't forget to subscribe to stay informed about the most important updates and share this content to help Ukraine be heard. I'll see you in the comments. I'm Operator Starsky. As always, be safe.